Hi and welcome. To start with, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the few of the key components that together make up the bass guitar. Today, I'm going to be showing you around using my 5-string bass. Every bass guitar is slightly different as companies use different materials and design ideas to create new instruments. But fundamentally, each design has to do the same job, and it's their own take on a tried and tested philosophy. For example, you might have heard of or own a fretless or a headless bass. There are also extended range basses, which include your 5, 6 and multi-stringed instruments. However, regardless of the configuration or type of the bass that you might be using, you'll find that your instrument, as my instrument, as everyone else's instrument, is made up of exactly the same key components. If you're an absolute beginner and just picking up the instrument for the first time, then this lesson is a perfect opportunity for you to get acquainted with what will hopefully become a lifelong friend. Okay, I'm going to start at one end of my instrument and work my way down to the other, giving you a brief overview of what each part does and why it's there. I'm going to start with what we call the headstock. Now, obviously, if you have a headless bass, the clue's in the title there, and you won't have one of these. But the majority of bass guitars have one, and its sole purpose is to mount the tuners. Each string on the bass has its own tuning peg, whose primary function is to allow us to change the tension of the string that runs to it, and therefore changing the pitch of that string. More tension in the string results in a higher pitched note, and vice versa. Moving down from the headstock and the tuners, we see the strings running over a little piece of material here. This is what we call the nut. Now, the nut can be made from a variety of materials, including bone, graphite or brass, and its job is to space the strings evenly at the end of the fingerboard on their way to the tuning pegs. Now we come to the neck of the bass. This runs from the headstock right up to the body, and glued on top of the neck is something we call the fingerboard. Fingerboards generally need to be hard wearing and tend to be made from harder woods such as maple, rosewood and ebony, although nowadays it's not uncommon to find composite materials being used. You can see on this instrument that the fingerboard is divided by a number of metal strips. These are called frets. Frets divide the length of the fingerboard into half-step or semitone intervals and allow us to change the pitch of the string depending on where we choose to fret the note. If you move up by 1 fret, you've gone up in pitch by 1 semitone. Pressing down on a fret has the effect of changing the length of a string. The shorter the string is, the higher the pitch. And it's typical that most basses have between 21 and 24 frets. Staying with the neck for a second, I'm just going to mention about a very important component of the bass guitar. It's called the truss rod, and it's an adjustable metal bar that runs down the entire length of the neck, just under the fingerboard. Its main function is to keep the bass intact. If we didn't have a truss rod and just made our neck out of wood and strung the strings up, the bass would collapse. Quite simply, it would fold in two, as the wood alone is not strong enough to cope with the forces put onto the neck by tuning the strings up to tension. The truss rod is there to counteract this force and hold the neck straight. It pulls the neck in this direction whilst the strings pull on the neck the other way.